Homelessness is a global issue that's different in every country. It affects the mentally ill, the poor, the children, and many more.
I was as bad as you can get, especially since I knew in my brain that I could do better, but I couldn't. I was gripped. I had the grip, you know. A lot of people now I see, you could just tell they're doing whatever they got to do.
In the USA, organizations are trying to improve aid and find solutions to this long-standing problem.
There's not one size fits all definition of a homeless person that's out there.
I think there's definitely a stigma associated with homelessness.
It's very easy to think that we know what people need and they're the experts of their lives.
I'm Kim Clark.
And I'm Pat Werheim.
We go out into the world to look at everything.
Topics such as food deserts, wage theft, and recidivism in jails.
Access to healthcare, education, welfare, major issues we face at home and around the world today.
Come search with us for answers to these issues and more
as we discovered new answers to today's big questions. Today, we're going to tell the story of James.
James is an interesting man. He was homeless, he was a drug and alcohol abuser, and he was challenged in ways that we can't even imagine.
Oh, before that, I was a mess. I was all in the alleys and all in the dumpsters and all on Skid Row. Yeah. The old Skid Row on Madison and Hospital, I lived there for about 2 years. Shut the family out, shut the world off.
James took us to his apartment. He stopped drinking about 25 years ago, and along the way, he found freedom from homelessness as well.
I've been there and I could feel what people might be feeling at that point, you know. I've considered myself in recovery. I've been sober since June 17, 1989. Before 1989, June 17th, I was on the street.
Yeah?
Yeah.
What was that like?
Indescribable. You wouldn't believe it if I told you.
To understand the situation, we asked many experts exactly what causes homelessness.
There are lots of reasons why people become homeless. Some of those reasons include domestic violence. Some of it includes substance abuse. Some of it just includes poor choices, poor money management, just an array of things. Some of the cases that we see are men and women who have severe mental health issues and are not medicating. Instead, they find themselves self-medicating with either, alcohol or drugs, and that leads them to our doors. And so we don't have one particular thing that we found that leads people here.
Well, a little turn to the left or a little turn to the right, I probably could have been, or any of us could have been a person that would be privileged for the rest of our life. And my mother died in 1959. So that's ironically enough, that's when I really started the street thing. I was 12, took my first drink, took my first beer. And it seemed to be a pattern. Even through the military, we drank a lot in the military. And I went to prison, jail. I'm not unfamiliar with them either. So that's basically my life. But now I'm content now.
Very few homeless people that I've met around the world have arrived there by choice, They've arrived there because they've been pushed, by family breakdown, by mental health, by addiction of some kind, or they've been pulled. They've come from migration to try and find a better life for themselves. They've left to try and get a job in a city. They're not there by a choice to live an easy life. And my debate is that if those people are vulnerable and they need to be helped, then we need, out of a principle of human solidarity, to step out there and help them. And that costs money, but it's money well spent.
I see some people that I think a lot worse off than I was. But I was as bad as you can get, especially since I knew in my brain that I could do better, but I couldn't. I was gripped. I had the grip, A lot of people now I see, you could just tell they're doing whatever they got to do. People carry a lot of bags around the street. They just go wherever they want to go. Sleep here, sleep there, eat whatever and whenever. I got a lot of passion. I guess other people have their compassion too. Mine might show more, or maybe it doesn't, I don't know. I'm just a crumb in the bread box.
Of the estimated homeless currently living in America, nearly a quarter are under the age of 18.
These young people are homeless for a myriad of reasons. It could be that they've been kicked out, locked out. It could be that they're emancipating from the child welfare system, so that's why they're homeless. It could be that their parents or their family members no longer able to take care of them for economic reasons, for housing issues, or just completely being absent from their lives. We've had young people who've come to us with parents that have either been dead, incarcerated, or transient and living on the streets themselves, and so therefore unable to care for them.
They got people out there I see on Clark and Lake Brown Line train at a.m. in the morning. I see people out there that got to be underage.
You see people young like that that are really living.
Younger and younger. And females too. I saw a female with a kid with her, a one that's pregnant. This Hispanic girl was on the L, she was pregnant. As a matter of fact, she's been riding every morning. I don't know where she goes, don't ask her. But now she's always ready to deliver. She should get about 2 weeks before she delivers.
Beginning in 2007, since the Great Recession, it was really families that led the increase into homelessness, right? As a result of lost wages, loss of affordable housing, the foreclosure crisis. And so it's really been families with children that have struggled. So here are some of the things we know about kids who experience homelessness. We're talking children as part of families. We know that fewer than 1 in 4 kids who experience homelessness will graduate from high school. We know that children who experience homelessness have half the rate of math and literacy levels as their low-income housed counterpart children. We know that children and kids who experience homelessness have higher rates of mental illness and acute and chronic physical illnesses as well.
Well, we had an example in Ireland where 2 young people died, again, of hypothermia on the Liffey River one night, 16-year-olds, active drug users. And the government stepped in and said, we have under state law a duty to 16 to 18-year-olds to make sure that they're safe. The view was that they were better inside than outside, and we probably stood a better chance of resolving their problem if we could meet with them and talk with them rather than meet them on the street. And we did this over a winter in Dublin, and nobody died. But actually the big clincher for the city was when they looked at the statistics for the city centre, begging dropped by 40%. From that crowd of people. Violent behaviour and petty crime declined by 20 to 30%. So by an investment in tackling that kind of social issue, there was a massive impact in the health and wealth and well-being of the city centre.
People don't choose this life. Things happen, and sometimes things happen quickly, they spiral out of control, and someone who doesn't have resources, an asset base, a community of other people that they can count on, are truly left really vulnerable.
Homelessness is a destination that people have arrived at for a whole variety of needs. So it could be with a young person the breakdown of a family, it could be about alcohol, it could be about drugs, it could be about mental health, it could be about all of the above for some people. So these people who are then on the street labelled homeless are actually there for a whole variety of reasons. There's not one size fits all definition of a homeless person that's out there.
If you think about what has been acceptable in our society throughout history, right? We say bag lady. Right. We've got a list of derogatory terms and stigmas that are associated with people in poverty or in homeless conditions. And I think that stigma in itself has caused us to react to people in a certain way.
I think there's definitely a stigma associated with homelessness. There have been lots of interviews with folks who are experiencing homelessness that say, one of my biggest stigmas is just sort of feeling invisible, that if they are literally on the streets, that people just sort of look right through them or over them or past them. People experiencing homelessness have reported to us sort of this sort of loss and sense of, not being part of humanity.
It has created the kind of systems that exist. And so one of the things that we try to do is to reframe our language. And so when we talk about people coming through our doors, we say people who are in crisis. Because if we're honest, probably all of us have experienced some kind of crisis. And depending on the network at our disposal will determine how we're able to respond to that crisis. It's using language probably more encompassing of the human experience. The other thing is that when we think about, for example, mental health in the United States of America, there's so many stigmas associated with it. And I think now we're beginning to see that some of those stigmas have created some real problems for us as a society. And so, you know, we embrace terms that would allow the men and women that we partner with to really get what they need without having the stigma associated with words like mental illness, you know? So we'll say, hey, you may just need somebody to talk about this with. Right. And so I think language is important and how we use language, and all of the stigmas that exist in our society have, you know, kind of created some obstacles to people being able to move forward.
And I live a normal life, you know. I got 2 kids, a teenager. I got a daughter in Miami, a son in Humboldt Park in Chicago. I got grandkids and great-grandkids. I work with people on the street that need things as best I can. I'm not an intellectual type. I'm more of a streetwise person. Yeah, I do things kind of at random. I try to live in the moment. But I don't think there's no such thing as a bad person. I think it's people that might decide to do bad things. Some because that's what they have to do to survive.
Is that based
Not
on your
to-
experience?
Well, some, based on what I did and what I had to do and what I thought I had to do. In retrospect, I know a lot of times if I could do it again, I would just go and get somebody else to communicate and get some advice instead of acting on my impulse, you know. Because that got to be a big problem back in the day. Impulsive things don't usually work out for me.
I find if you listen to somebody, they'll tell you what they need.
Mm-hmm.
But I've often stumbled from wanting to give them my solution instead of listening.
Yeah, it's very easy to think that we know what people need. And so one of our mottos in staff is just this idea that they're the experts of their lives. We're not the expert of anybody else's life. The people that we partner with, that we walk alongside of, they are the true experts. We're really holistic. Probably 20% of those self-identify as having one of those issues, either mental health condition or substance abuse. And so we do have someone on staff that is certified in alcohol and drug addiction recovery. And so we've got programming that is specifically designed for those who have decided that they'd like to address that issue. It's not mandatory. In a trauma-informed environment, what we really want to say is that we don't want anybody else re-traumatized. And so we don't have a rule that says that you've got to be sober when you enter our program, because that's not realistic. And we probably would have a lot of people who would just remain on the street if that was the case. But we also realize that substance abuse leads to poor choices and unproductive behaviors, and that they need to be addressed, and it needs to be addressed in an environment that can be both challenging and supportive, and that's what we try to provide.
Certainly, some of the folks that we work with here at La Casa Norte every day do have substance use issues, and some have mental health issues. That's not all of the people that we work with at all. You know, certainly these are people who do need assistance, who do need help, and they need resources on multiple levels, both housing and economic resources, as well as addiction recovery resources.
You've got to make people believe that they can solve problems, right? And the way to do that is to talk about stories about where that's happened in different parts of the world. And then it's getting alongside them to help them to break through.
Getting the apartment you got was just happening to be the right place, the right place.
Yeah, with the right person, because Vanessa didn't know me.
No, it was a wonderful.
She just said, hey,
person.
you know what? I see this dude is tired of living in this all men's
Right.
hotel. He can't be
Fantastic.
eating 3 meals a day.
And she
I'm
saw
just
you were
gonna
trying.
Yeah, she didn't have no problem with no money and no car, Yeah, she didn't have no problem with no money and no car, no gas, and she got a home and a condo. She just felt like doing something for somebody. You know?
And she had seen you before.
She had seen me, but she didn't know my situation
No,
because I
no.
disguised it. I
Right.
come in, wear a tie, and
Right.
that's how I relapsed.
You bet.
The grand behavior, switching
Right.
around like a peacock.
Right.
Snubbing my nose, thinking
Yeah.
I'm all that in the bag of potato chips. And people say, the old timers kept telling me, boy, if you don't get humble, something might happen to you. They didn't tell me that I would drink or I would
Yeah.
go to jail. They said, look, if you don't get humble and get some humility, something might happen to you.
Yeah.
And it's not nothing nice.
Wow.
It's hard to, without getting emotional, because I'm
I know
a
it.
crybaby too.
Yeah.
Last time I spoke at the Evans Club,
Yeah.
I was the guest speaker out there, I cried. People say, oh, he's a wimp. But most people that knew the emotions that come with people
No.
who lived a life that sordid, Bowery life, and then now they can get up and wash up and go to their own bathroom
Yes.
and get to their own, for a non-cooker, just throw some butter in the skillet and cook some eggs instead of waiting in line to get paid a can of oatmeal or bowl
Yeah.
of oatmeal. It's just, you can't put that in words.
You bet.
I try to do whatever people do for me to other people.
How do you help people?
A smile, a cigarette, a sandwich, positive conversation, not being negative and pessimistic, but trying to make people think optimism is better than being, low self-esteem or pessimistic, Even though sometimes I fall into, a lull, but I try to kind of keep a facade where things are really basically all right. Food, water, shelter, and clothing. A breath of fresh air, a good meal. In my case, being a smoker, a cigarette now and then, or maybe more often than that. As long as it's not nothing that alters my mind chemically, I'm all right.
We have made it again a crime in this country to have an addiction, to have a mental illness. You can look at instances all through Western Europe, particularly in the Netherlands. You look at people who have substance use issues, and their relationships to crime, to criminalization is much lower, much lower than what it is in the US, because of how we've dealt with them needing a health resource as an addiction, as opposed to thrown out, locked out of society, sort of with the scarlet letter.
Basically, the world is divided into a homelessness debate that goes down the middle of what we call rights and responsibilities. So in countries like the UK, Ireland, France, if you become homeless, you have certain rights immediately to housing, to money, benefits that will support you. If I go to Eastern Europe, or if I go to America, then it's a question of personal responsibilities. You got yourself into this, you've got to get yourself out of this. So you kind of have to earn your way out of homelessness. The kind of debate is, how do you create the systems and structures in such different cultures to allow people to climb out? So in the UK and Ireland, that's about how we complement the kind of like the existing provision, but understand that sometimes people slip through safety nets. How do we catch them? In the USA, in Slovakia, it's actually much more about how do we build ladders out of this. So how do we think of building the systems through the volunteer forces that are out there? The US is a strange country, as I say, because it seems to be built on this idea of, if you become homeless, you got yourself there, you get yourself out. So it's more similar actually to the work we do in Ukraine and Slovakia than it is to the work we do in the UK and in Ireland, in lots of ways. In other ways, it isn't, because what you do have here, even though there are less rights if you become homeless, what you do have is an enormously generous public response to homelessness, and fantastic organisations that are doing a great job.
I think that homelessness is obviously clearly associated with poverty in this country, and I think there's significant stigmas with poverty in the United States of America. I think that we have made it a crime to be poor in this country, and we have said that you've done something wrong. You haven't played the right game. You've made wrong choices, and as a result, so be it. This is what's going to happen to you. Now, I clearly understand that everyone has to be held accountable for the choices and decisions that they make in life. Everyone who has the mental capacity to do that. But at the same time, I believe that in this country, we have a certain level of understanding around what are human rights and what are sort of the baseline minimal levels of standards of living in this country as well.
At the moment, we don't even really understand what homelessness is. It means different things in different countries. So, do we include people who are escaping famine? Do we include people who are escaping from conflict or war? How do we define what homelessness is? And then once you've defined it, how do you accurately quantify it? How do you actually sit down and say, this problem is getting better or this problem is getting worse?
You may have a plan that they've created, and then you come to the end of, your time with them, and you realize that you haven't been nearly as effective as you had hoped, their time here would be. And so that's a challenge, and that's part of why we're always kind of redoing what we do.
A lot of people help me. I got to remember that first and foremost. So I try to do whatever people do for me to other people.
How do you help people?
A lot of my talk will be about recovery, because I see a lot of people that's interested in how they can get off substances or stop drinking or stop a certain behavior. So I give them my experience. I don't try to give them much of that I read. I give them my experience, because I'm not therapeutic, which is good, but I'm just not qualified to tell people what they should do in any given situation. I tell them what I did and what my solution was. It seems to keep me from getting to be, too high up or appearing to be too low down. I'll never stop trying, because it's a part of my makeup, part of me, I get discouraged, but, I regroup, go right back at it. It's just a part of what I do, part of what I like doing, I'm more comfortable not being, thinking that everything is bad, or everybody is bad. I don't think there really no such thing. There might be a bad people with bad genes or bad personality, but I don't think there's no such thing as a bad person. I think it's people that might decide to do bad things, some because that's what they have to do to survive.
We absolutely do not condone any type of illegal behavior, not at all. What we condone is people being in charge of their lives and making decisions that will help improve their lives if they see it as an opportunity for themselves. Again, I think this is the thing to know, that people who are experiencing homelessness are not criminals. For the most part, these are people who are actually preyed upon, who are actually victims of crime, who are not, in fact, the predators, but who have had some type of emotional, physical challenges in their lives that have led them to these certain circumstances. One of the ways we talk about truly preparing young people to succeed is that they have to have the mental, right, and emotional, cognitive behavior and ability and capacity to learn, right? So how will children do well in school if they don't have the capacity and sort of background and stability growing up? Then they go to school, they're doing poorly, and all that leads, right, to the terrible outcomes that we know. Early pregnancy, gang involvement, lower literacy levels, and then of course, lower performance in the workforce and the lack of the ability to be economically self-sufficient. It's our job to provide resources. I think as a community, it's also our job to work with policymakers and elected officials to truly understand what the types of policies that should be implemented in our country to help destigmatize, to truly help deal with some of these challenges.
I don't mind anybody giving $1, right? Sometimes in some parts of the world, that's exactly what that person needs at that time. So I'm not averse to giving $1. But my preferred option, what really is going to make a big structural change to their life, is think about giving to a charity that really has a mission and a vision to move that person off the streets into society and finding them a job and a meaningful purpose to their days. The solutions to their life aren't really that difficult. This isn't rocket science. This is just about thinking and listening to that individual and responding to their need.
I think it gives us hope that life recovery is possible.
Yes.
No matter what those situations are, recovery is possible. And that is just amazing in itself, just to know that people possess inside of them what is needed. And so the rest of us are really just destined to walk with them through the journey.
Some things never ending, so I don't.
Yeah.
There's no conclusion. If I keep doing what I'm doing, and it's been resulting in what I call peace of mind,
Yes.
living within my means, I
Yes.
think I'll just keep doing what I'm doing. I don't see no conclusion. I don't see no the end.
Yes.
You know, if I ever see the end, chapter, book closed and sealed, I think it won't be no reason to go and pursue that. So I just get up and go.
What you're doing is really dealing with the causes of what's happening here. You know, you're really getting to the roots with making this not perpetuating a street lifestyle by handing out a sandwich and a cup of tea to somebody. What you're saying is, I'm going to move these people off the street for good. You know, we're going to resolve this, and it has a cost to it. But I think, even from an economic point of view, I think the benefits will far outweigh the costs to the taxpayer.